Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, sometimes it takes a real shift in perspective to understand not just the value of your own life, but the value of the world that you're living in and of itself. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and a conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do because, quite frankly, you're listening right now. Subscribe. Please hit that subscribe button. Give us the old 5-star rating and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We're pretty much on every service like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google. It's pretty much all good. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we'd really appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on Instagram at... where else would we be? We're at In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because if we love to write about it and talk about it, we love it when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please pay us a visit. On this episode, we're diving into something that is hitting, had a bit of a theatrical run, but it's hitting video on demand this coming Friday. The film is called Carmen, and it is a beautiful film from writer-director Valerie Buhagiar. I apologize if I mispronounce that horribly, but she is one of Canada's own. She is a talent in and of herself, and it's the story that takes us to a small Mediterranean village where our protagonist Carmen, played by the electric Natascha McElhone, has she's looked after her brother, the local priest, for her entire life, and then ultimately the church abandons Carmen because, for reasons that we won't go into here, and she's mistaken for the new priest, and Carmen really starts to get a whole new perspective on the world and on herself as well. And it's a fantastic, and it's a lovely story of sort of personal empowerment, self-empowerment, and female empowerment, and it's really a fantastic piece of work, and I can't recommend it enough. But we had the unique pleasure of talking with not only Valerie, but star Natascha McElhone as well, and well, we had a fantastic conversation just about, sort of the nature of the character and telling this story, and the unique backdrop in which this story is set, and so very much more. But if you want to check out Carmen, like I said, it is coming to all video-on-demand providers this coming Friday, September 30th. But first, check out our talk with Valerie and Natascha, because between you and me, it's a pretty good one. All right. Well, Valerie, Natascha, obviously, first off, just thank you so much for the time today, and congratulations on the film. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, I mean, Valerie, I guess my first question is for you. Like, walk me through sort of the origin of the story on your end.
Sure thing. I'm originally from Malta, and then we immigrated to Canada when I was a child, and I grew up here in Toronto. And I've gone back many times. I have a lot of relatives there. And back in 2013, my son and I went visit relatives, and also I was researching another project. And on that trip, my cousin Tonino took me to visit my Aunt Rita, who was in a home at the time. And he explained her story to me in that, like, I've always known about Aunt Rita, but I really couldn't figure out what her thing was, because she always dressed in black, but she wasn't a nun, and she seemed extremely pious. He told me that there was a tradition in Malta that when a man became a priest, which happened often, his sister would go with him and be his maid. And she would not get an education, a salary, or have a family of her own. And my Aunt Rita did that at the age of 13. She took care of my great uncle, Monsignor, and then she took care of my uncle, Dunpal, a priest, and that was her life. So I took that tradition, and I let it percolate for a long time, because I made a few other things before. And I sat down, wrote that script, and basically it's like, what if Aunt Rita, what if she just kicked out of there, and did her own thing? What
For sure.
Yeah. So that's where it all came from. Yeah.
Now, I guess my next question is for you, Natascha. Just like walk me through sort of seeing this character and sort of your initial reactions.
The script was, I read the script in one, heartbeat. I couldn't put it down and fell in love with it. And I guess my only question to my agent was, is this really happening, or is it another one of those wonderful scripts that I'm going to fall in love with that never sees the light of day and never gets financed and never gets made? Because I can't get into this. I can't get my heart broken. I just need to know what's the chance of this getting made. So I think that was my first question, because that's what independent movies tend to be like. However, once we got past that, and it did all happen incredibly quickly, as far as I remember, and we shot it incredibly quickly as well, which I think it's the only way to do this in this genre, in this sort of financial climate. You just to get your ducks in a row and then to get on with it. It cannot be that thing of, we might shoot it next spring, or we might shoot it next 2025. The minute I start hearing that stuff, I'm like, it's never going to happen. Whereas this, they'd really done all of their prep and they had it all lined up, so it was very easy. I believe, I was super excited to put the time aside because I thought this has a chance of actually getting made. So those are the first concerns, unfortunately, just the logistical and practical ones. But in terms of the character, she was recognizable to me, not for a second because I, had any previous experience or connection with Malta, but because I think in a lot of Catholic countries, this way of living and, particularly in the 70s and before, obviously, the reverence to church and sort of anything ecumenical, and the hierarchy of all of that, and women being very, very it's kind of like the bottom feeders, the lowest strata, until recently, is very. My family's Catholic, and my family live in Ireland, or they lived in Ireland. My mum is back there now. Actually, she lives again there, but brought me up in England and then went back. It's pretty similar, I think, the culture that Valerie's described of the women taking care of the man who's decided to go and be a man of the cloth. And so there was a familiarity to the sentiment, I suppose, and the sort of spirit of the piece, even if not. The Maltese accent was Maltese, full stop, is just impossible for me. I mean that was a challenge, but I had some great help, really lovely helpers, the other actors mostly, who were incredibly supportive about all of that. You need to credit them.
Yeah, I think you aced the accent. You did an amazing job, because I have a tough time with the accent and the language.
It's difficult, isn't it?
It's difficult.
I remember Michaela, and it's also different. So Michaela had a very different accent to, say, Pauline had a very different accent, and it wasn't just a generational thing. They would tell me it's so unique to each person because of all the different influences.
Totally.
And so, yeah.
Now, I mean, obviously you did a great job, but I mean, one of the things which I loved, and I mean, it's a bit of a loaded question, but I have to ask, because that red dress feels like a character unto itself. And I mean, just sort of the shot of you on the beach and the dress feels very iconic. And I mean, I've got to ask, where did you find the dress, or like, did you design the dress? Because I mean, it really is such a linchpin for Natascha's character to have this pivot.
You are not to answer that question, Valerie. No.
You're not going to answer. Should I answer it?
I forbid you. I forbid you, because that then is some free advert. We're not doing that. I'm making a strong decision.
So you're keeping it. It's all right.
We cannot talk about it.
No, we can't.
Let it have its mystery.
All right. There we go.
Well, I love this. Now I'm dying, because I'm even more fascinated by this story.
That's the point. Good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
All right, now I guess Valerie, my next question is, because the film really has a very sort of expansive and big look. How important was it for you to make Carmen sort of this very small character in this big world, but eventually sort of it got closer and closer on her to really make us feel how important she was sort of in this universe?
Oh, so I'm so glad you noticed that. You do all these metaphors, I don't know if that's a word, things to build the piece and the character, and you don't know if people pick up on that or not. But yes, through in my prep, my visual treatment, it was all about making her. It's all about her inner life, right? Her emotional life, and she's small in the frame. And as she finds her voice, she gets bigger and bigger. The color treatment for wardrobe were muted colors, no flowers in the frame, that sort of thing. And then when Carmen finds her voice, I think it was scene 61 or something like that. We see more flowers in the frame. The wardrobe changes, her makeup changes. There's more color, and it's all to represent her. It's all in parallel to this woman's inner life, and you got it. Thank you. Yeah. Did I answer that correctly?
No, I think you did. I think you did, because I mean, again, just to seeing the character's journey is really a fascinating one. And I mean, Natascha, you're going to laugh at this, and this is probably the boy question, me asking you this, but I mean, in watching your performance, I almost felt a parallel to another film that you'd been in, and you're going to laugh, but it's Ronin. I almost felt like you were Bob's character, and sort of by the end going, I never left. And sort of seeing sort of this character sort of start small and then get bigger and bigger and more important and more vital to the narrative. And I mean, for you, how important was it to sort of make sure this character had an arc? Because obviously you started very meek, and then sort of as everything progressed, you got very much more sort of important and sort of bold in the frame.
Yeah, I think that's very much Valerie's writing. It was the arc was ever present. It was embedded in the story. All I had to do was follow it like a sort of roadmap. It was a real dream for an actor to act, because quite often one finds, you're invited to take part in something to hopefully elevate it, give it the best version of the character that you possibly can, all of those things. But very often in jobs, you're doing a lot more than that. You're writing as well, or you're trying to compensate for things that in draft 6 they've forgotten to tether it to the fact that the character walks out of that door with whatever, even logistical boring stuff. But you've always you have to stay awake all the time and be very protective of your character's story. Whereas I felt in this, Valerie had already done all the caretaking for her story. It was incredibly well crafted and well rounded and well thought through. Often writers and directors don't have time to mine each character's story in the thorough way in which she did in this project. And I think also there's a lot of humor. I mean, I remember laughing out loud when I read the script, or being able to visualize what this moment would look like, or that moment would look like. And I don't know, sometimes, because we honestly had so little time to shoot this, there were scenes where we got one shot at it, one take. I mean, sometimes it was just a master shot, or sometimes it was, we could afford a 2-shot and, maybe a close-up, and that would be it. We'd have to move on. So I was always worried that I was doing a disservice to an awful lot of the lovely content in the script, that if I'd, had a couple more shots at that, I would have eked more humor out, or more, sentiment, or more emotion, or more whatever. But again, what's the French thing? Sans la joie, il y a pas de choix, or something like that. That in a sense maybe makes it easier in the cutting room, because you've only got the material you've shot and you need to use it all. Right. I'm not sure.
No, Natascha, Natascha, she's a blessing. This film would not be what it is if it wasn't for her work. Oh, look, you're backlit. You look amazing right now.
That is a gorgeous shot. Yeah.
Just been touched.
Carmen is with us.
Yes. And we had a Q&A for our opening in Toronto just on Friday, and Stephen Love, who plays Paolo, went on about Natascha and her book. So, you know, you didn't just walk on set, Natascha. Natascha has this,
my little
her script with all these colored ships, and the audience, you know, we were like, Stephen was like, the mystery of that book, and it's like that's why your performance is so brilliant, because of the you know, you pay attention to the detail as an actor, and that's so, it's such a gift for a director to have someone who gets it, who wants to collaborate, who's so creative and puts their own in, you know. So don't forget about that.
Well, it, you know, it comes from the top. It came, that freedom, it came from, and that permission came from Valerie, that she would always, even though we were so restricted with time, let me have a go at doing something crazy and silly, in case it was usable, which is again very rare. I mean, quite often you get quash. I mean, you know this, Val, from your acting, you know, all the stuff you've acted in. You just, you know, you know, you dare to dream for a second, you dare to want to try something, and it's just, no, obviously not. You don't understand anything. No. And so therefore you stop experimenting anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas I felt this was a space that was incredibly creative for everyone, because we were all allowed to try things.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than cramming someone's instincts in a box, you know. You want them to trust their instincts and play. And my job is to make you safe. Yeah.
I mean, I've got to
emotionally
imagine,
and physically. Sorry?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that's all I had to do.
No, but I mean, I've got to imagine, especially for you, Natascha, because I mean, obviously, you know, there's limited time, limited money, you've got to stay on point, but then on the other side of your brain, it's like, oh my God, we're in Malta. I'm sure there's distractions sort of on top of that. Does the material, does the leadership from someone like Valerie to sort of help you sort of stay focused on the moment?
Well, actually, in this instance, having to do everything slightly on the hoof, and also having to, as we were talking earlier on, you know, there was no trailers, there was none of the usual protocol that, you know, you may get on a set, or that sort of side of the organization. And there's two costumes, there's a black dress and there's a red dress, and that's it. And so, you know, all of that is incredibly simplified and reduced, a little bit like Carmen's life. I mean, there was no excess in her life. She probably owned about 4 things, as you saw her bundle her goods into a little suitcase. And I felt that the film really reflected that. It actually, everything and the way that we shot was an enormous support and help to the storytelling. I felt we kind of got changed on the streets, you know, pretty much behind a car. And I would to do that, by the way. No one would say, you know, they'd have a nice room somewhere hidden in a house. I would rather make the journey into that house to get changed in that room and come back down again, you know, pushing in the same direction, which was a real joy, and also fun. I mean, the thing we haven't said is we had so much fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really fun.
It was
and
fun. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the environment is, because we, unlike a lot of projects where you're shooting someone, like, for example, I'm doing this thing called Hotel Portofino, and we shoot it in Croatia. Now, of course, it's great because it's Adriatic Sea, and you know, it's a very easy shift to imagine. But there's something about shooting in the place that you are meant to be in that is glorious, and shooting in a real church, not a set, but we were in a church. I mean, all of the places that we used were real places that hadn't been touched for many, many years, and would have been the same in you know, in Carmen or in your aunt's time. That there wasn't, I didn't have to make too many leaps of imagination for that. It was all given to you on a plate, which was wonderful.
Now, I mean, for both of you, just to start putting a bow on this, like, what do you think sort of the legacy of, I mean, not just the film, but I mean, to me, the character really is when people see this, because to me, when I watched it, I mean, this is a very sort of understated tale of the importance of empowerment and the importance of just learning how to live your own life. For both of you, what do you hope the audiences really pull away from this film?
Well, a few things. I mean, that if we inspired someone to tell their story, great. To kick out of their homes and live their lives, great. But also for a viewer, that woman that's sitting on the back of the bus, she's got a story. Just
For
remember
sure.
that. Yeah.
Natascha?
Yeah, I guess to me there's something about her. I know this is so hackneyed and overused as a phrase, particularly at the moment, but I really feel that she was someone that pivoted, that switched from living a life of routine and habit, and yet she stayed malleable enough, and alive enough. There was it was like those little flames that were carried in, I think, in sort of mushrooms or in leather pouches back in ancient times, and carried across continents or whatever to keep the embers going. That somehow the embers were still hot enough to get reignited. And I love that idea that it doesn't really matter what stage of life you are, you still have a choice to rise up and get your flame on.
Well, you know what? Well, we may never know the legacy of the red dress. That Carmen is definitely one of those characters that sort of stands out and really, at least to me, connects to audiences. And I think you've both done a great job with this. And I just want to say thank you both for the time today. And again, congratulations on the work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.